Hello and welcome to episode 289 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Podcast of Many Topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I have not said this in months, but this is RPG Villains. Welcome back. This is our fifth time doing episodes all about a specific villain within an RPG. This is a pastiche, a adaptation of the Villains podcast run by Shea Serrano of the Ringer Podcast Network. But while he does his villain episodes about movie villains, we do our episodes on RPG villains. And today's RPG villain is one that we talked about a little bit last week and the week before, but this time we're going to go into it with a episode format specific angle. Psaro the Manslayer from Dragon Quest IV. And to talk about Psaro today, I'm joined with two of my cohorts from the previous few episodes about Dragon Quest IV, starting with Alana Hagues.
Hello.
And Zach Wilkerson.
Hi there.
So, Alana and Zach, all three of us recently played through the entirety of Dragon Quest IV. It was Alana's first time, Zach and my not first time. So I'm sure we all have thoughts on Psaro. But I guess let's see. We don't need to introduce how we know Psaro or how we know Dragon Quest IV, because we just did the past couple of episodes about that. But give me one feeling or idea you have about Dragon Quest IV, just so I don't completely waste the intro. I'll go first. Dragon Quest IV just feels so ahead of its time. It has an unusual structure with the multiple chapters and character introductions that feels fresh and interesting in 2021 and must have been downright incredible in 1990. And I was just so impressed with the bones of the game and the framework of the game and how well it held up. Does anyone else have a random Dragon Quest IV thought before we go on to Psaro?
It's a game that, when I go back and play like Dragon Quest 1 or 2, or honestly even 3, which 3 has certainly some things that distinguish it from 4 and make it remarkable in terms of jobs and stuff like that, but it feels like almost like the baseline for like the next generation of RPGs, and it still feels fresh. Like I don't feel like I'm playing an NES RPG, and obviously the last couple times I played it, I haven't played it on NES. It feels like I'm playing a remade Super Nintendo RPG, and I think that makes it really digestible in a way that maybe some others aren't. It gives you more breadcrumbs than other earlier Dragon Quest games do in terms of where you're going and what you're doing. And so to me, it certainly feels the most playable and the most enjoyable of any of the NES ones.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can say anything different, really, other than agree with both of you. Like, it feels like I haven't played 1, 2, and 3, so I can't really go back and compare, but, like, even watching footage of the NES version, like, it still had a lot of character about it. I can't think of any other NES RPG that has that much character to it compared to Dragon Quest IV, and, yeah, like, we all played a remade version of it, like, DS or mobile, but, like, it felt so much closer to 5 than I thought it would. I don't know why I expected it to be slightly more. I don't know, like... But yeah, I was genuinely quite surprised, and I think Psaro is one of the biggest reasons that Dragon Quest IV stands out, especially because other than your Dark Facts and your, I don't know, Garlands and Cloud of Darkness and whatever, like, what other villain and Ganon, what other villains, like, because even Ganon's kind of just like a figure in Zelda. Like, what other villain can you, like, stick a name to and have, like, a backstory to? He probably had a little bit in the NES version, obviously the remakes, like, add to it, but here we've got like sort of a fully fleshed out character, and I don't really think I can think of any examples from the same period of time, or at least before that, that are like Psaro. So yeah, he's like one of the big reasons I think Dragon Quest IV stands out.
Totally agree with both of you. Dragon Quest IV feels ahead of its time, feels like a cut above other NES RPGs in sophistication, and Psaro is part of it. But let's go into exactly who Psaro is and what he does in the course of Dragon Quest IV. There is a vague demon army threatening the world at the beginning of Dragon Quest IV. We meet 4 characters or groups of characters in the first 4 chapters that are each dealing with or encountering the edges of the demon army in their own way, and Psaro is mentioned as the demon army's commander and a great fighting champion at the arena or at the fighting tournament part of chapter 2. And so we know the name hinted at early on, and then at the beginning of Chapter 5, Psaro leads an army of demons to destroy the hero's hometown and murder their adopted family, and seeks a power called the Secret of Evolution to gain enough power to wipe out the world. As the hero is searching for the sacred equipment that will allow them to defeat the demon army, he meets Psaro's loved one, an elf named Rose, and learns that part of the reason Psaro hates humans and is leading the demons is because Rose has been threatened by humankind for her tears, which she cries out rubies, which the greed of humanity attracts her to that. And then when Rose dies, following a misunderstanding, Psaro just gives in to grief and despair, uses the Secret of Evolution to turn into a giant monster, and the hero has a final clash with Psaro in the sort of the demon homeworld. But in the mobile and DS versions of the game, there is an alternate ending through a secret Chapter 6 that allows you to change the nature of the story a little bit, but we'll talk about that later. So, our first category is the intimidation category. Is Psaro scary? Is Psaro an effective villain? Yes, no, maybe. What do we think?
I mean, I think so. I think that he's introduced to us really first in that Chapter 2 arena stuff with Alana. He may have he's mentioned sort of. Is he mentioned offhand in Ragnar's chapter? I can't remember.
Not by name, I don't think, but certainly you can link the incident back to him, I think, by the time you hear his name in Chapter 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I'm not sure if he's named explicitly, but the demon army definitely is. And we see some of what they do.
And I think that the introduction of him as being like this powerful person who, someone you can't take down and then he doesn't show up is like a really effective moment. It's sort of like enhancing the power that we think he has. And then he's just like sort of like this ever-present like sort of figure. And then, at the beginning of Chapter 5, him literally burning, like you being attacked. And in the NES version, it's the first time you ever see your hero. And your hero is attacked by him and his entire village is wiped out. And I think that all of those incidences make him into a figure that is intimidating and someone who I think is effective on that front, personally.
Yeah, I pretty much said everything I would say, really. I think that the game does a really fantastic job of building him up. And for a while, at the beginning of Chapter 5, like after he destroys the village, he kind of disappears for a bit and the focus goes back to Balzac. But when you, again, link Balzac back to Psaro, it's then this realization that he's got this like domino effect in like everything that's happened, whether it's tied to wherever you knew it was tied to Psaro or not. That's when you realize, it all goes back to this one person. So he's intimidating in a different way to, I think, any of the other villains that we've examined on the show, because the others have been so much more physically present in the game, whether it be by, I don't know, being there and pretending to be an ally, or literally showing up and, poisoning rivers and other things. Like, whereas Psaro, he turns up in Chapter 5. Before then, it's just by name. And then after that, you don't see him again for a long time. So you've just got this expectation of, like, this terrifying human who has become a demon, manipulating all of the monsters in the world. And that in itself is pretty scary, I think.
Yeah, Psaro does something that I think Sephiroth did in the original Final Fantasy VII and does not do in the remake of Final Fantasy VII. And I've used this comparison multiple times, so I apologize. But they do the Jaws thing. They're scarier and more powerful by not seeing them. And because Psaro is mentioned by name and you learn his reputation without seeing him physically, for a while builds his aura, builds his legend a little bit. And at the beginning of Chapter 5, when Psaro wipes out the hero's hometown, it's the hero is locked in a secret room, and they hear the killing and the mayhem behind a closed door. So you don't even see Psaro then. You just you hear him have a conversation. Like Psaro, by not being visibly present, but by seeing what he accomplishes and what the demon army is up to, it communicates very clearly that Psaro is powerful and dangerous and means business. there's no question about or very little empathy to be had with Psaro in those first couple of chapters. That the whole story with Rose and what goes into chapter 6 is all in later in chapter 5. So I think we're in agreement. This is Psaro is somewhat scary and definitely effective as a villain.
Yeah, and I think it's cool too that like you get wiped at the end of chapter 4 by one of his underlings, which indicates like how much more powerful he is. And I think that those things are and Marquis de Leon is like I think probably the second hardest boss fight in the main game, after probably Psaro. And again, like knowing that is like you're going to see Psaro as a souped up version of that, I think also helps enhance his intimidation. And he's not a pushover as a boss either, which I think is cool.
No, yeah.
All right, so I think it's time to move on to category 2. This category is called The Worst Behavior. What is the most awful thing that Psaro accomplishes over the course of Dragon Quest IV? Now, I have a couple candidates here, but we can add to the list if we decide to. First of all, generally feel like the very, very broad strokes attempting to take over the world. Second, seeking out and murdering children in Chapter 1. Third, wiping out the hero's hometown at the beginning of Chapter 5. And fourth, everything that happens in Zamokstva, the disappearance of Elena's family and friends. That's what I have so far. Is there anything else we definitely need to add to the list?
I don't know. Like, I think that's one of the really interesting things is, like, he doesn't do a lot, or at least not on camera. Like, yeah, like, out of the ones you listed, because originally I was thinking, oh, it'll be destroying the village. But no, murdering children's pretty horrible. Like, yeah, like, he doesn't do tons, which I think, like, the few things he does do, at least the rest of the things are either caused by the underlings and the other like monsters you fight. But largely he's more reactionary, isn't he? Like, he'll go out and do things, but like he's trying to take over the world, but he's not doing everything mindlessly kind of thing. He's not like just trying to kill people for the sake of it. He's doing it in certain instances where, oh, I could do this and then it'll be one more thing under my palm. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I think killing children is probably the chapter 1 thing is a pretty horrible way to start off the game, let's say.
Yeah, outside of that intro cutscene, like the first table setting that we get in the game is everyone in Berlin. There are children being abducted and killed all over the world, which is a bit of a holy what? The children are being what now? Kind of let's say the 10th minute of the game. That's which when I was sort of going over the plot of the game to figure out what to put on this list, I had sort of forgotten about that. Like, oh right, the demons were abducting and killing children. Whoops. and it's a little bit hard to know whether Psaro was accomplishing these, or I should say perpetrating these directly, or if it was demons doing this at the behest of someone else in the demon army, like Amon or something. But I think Psaro was pretty complicit. I mean, he definitely is present when the hero's hometown is being wiped out, and that's in the ongoing campaign to kill all the children. So right. I think that all the four that I mentioned were fair, and I'm sort of going in between killing the hero's hometown and killing children in a targeted campaign. But all of those things are pretty terrible because they involve genocide. That's kind of what this demon army is all about.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like because Psaro is physically present at the town being burned down, and also because some of the characters, sort of like your childhood friend, sweetheart, whatever, is killed in that. I feel like that gives it more impact, certainly in terms of the horror of it. But it's also interesting because I feel like the Psaro being sort of removed from a lot of those things and largely being reactionary is the thing that maybe allows us to still have some empathy with him. And it's interesting when you bring up some of those things. I'm like, why is it that I feel kind of bad for him toward the end? I shouldn't. Or this isn't and we'll talk about Magus in a moment here, I know, but he's not he's not a character who his motivations are I understand what they are, but they're also still horrific regardless. You know what I mean? So I feel like his removal from a lot of the situations allows us to maybe have a little bit more empathy with him, which for me is what makes the town burning the worst incident, personally.
Yeah, because we know for sure he was there at the time, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that leads into our next category. This one is called Maybe They Had a Point. Is there any justification for Psaro's actions? Is there a version of the story where Psaro is the hero and our hero's party are NPCs or the villains? I'll talk about this first. The other 4 episodes of RPG villains that we've done, and we've, I guess, hinted at this already, which are Porky from Earthbound, the Killer from Persona 4, Kefka from Final Fantasy VI, and Luca Blight from Suikoden 2. They are more openly evil and antagonistic than Psaro. This question is easier to answer for Psaro than it was for those 4, because I mean those other 4 were, I would call them closer to being psychopaths than Psaro, who is I mean, I don't want to say Psaro's not a psychopath exactly, because I mean he is trying to wipe out humanity and take over the world, but maybe they had a point question is easier to answer for him. Psaro, in another world, Psaro isn't evil. He is very powerful. He's a great fighter, a great magic user, a dangerous person or demon, as it were. But Psaro is doing all of this out of love and eventually out of grief because his beloved, the elf named Rose, is she's being persecuted by humans, and he feels like he needs to stop humanity to protect her and make the world safe for her. And the demon kind in general is supporting Psaro in this mission in a way because they definitely want to wipe out humanity and are happy to be along for the ride if the strongest demon is on board with this, even if it's not for exactly the same reason as every demon. I hope that wasn't too convoluted to understand. But because Psaro has this has Rose, and we see what Rose has been through and what eventually happens to her, Psaro is a little bit more empathetic than a lot of other megalomaniacal villains. When you first meet Rose, she's she acts like a terrified puppy or something almost. She thinks that humans have invaded her tower to take her ruby tears or worse to her. But she calms down when she sees how gentle the hero or heroine's eyes are, because of course you're a Dragon Quest hero. You're a paragon of goodness. But when you hit that point in Chapter 5 and see those scenes, you feel more empathy for Psaro than most video game villains by a large margin. So maybe they had a point. What do we think?
Yes. And I think the reason I came around to it in the end, because I'll be honest, I guess this is just because I'm playing it a long, long, long time after it came out, and I've played tons of other things. How many times does the girl have to die and the man have to go around and be angry about it? Seriously? But then there's the alternative side of it. So yes, he does have a point, because let's be honest, we do anything for the person we love, the people we love, and we would, if somebody hurt my brother or my family or something like that, then of course I would react in a reactionary way and want to do everything I could to not necessarily take revenge, but at least take a piece of that back for me. And I don't know whether this is the first instance of racism in a Japanese RPG. I'm sure probably not. I don't remember any from Final Fantasy 1 or 3 or any of the Phantasy Star I have played, but it's certainly an understandable motive, and I feel really bad for Psaro because it's just him doing what he thinks is right, and in his own head, he absolutely, and I mean, he is kind of the hero. He's the hero in his story because he's going to make a world perfect for Rose, right? But I think without that extra chapter in the DS version, I don't know, I'd feel sorry for him, but at least I know that, there's another way around it. The hero realizes, and it's we can do something about this. We don't have to kill him. We can save Rose and do something else. So I think that helps the cause a little bit. Yeah, so it is understandable. I just have maybe my own issues with it without that extra bit, because it's one of the oldest tropes in fiction, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, that women in refrigerators concept came around later in the 90s, because that's when the Green Lantern comic that inspired the term came around. But Rose is an example of one of those, a female character who dies unnecessarily to motivate a male character. It's a little bit more complicated than that, I know, but speaking generalizations, it's not a good look. And and I think that, you know, being able to undo that is really satisfying in the later versions of Dragon Quest IV and with the Chapter 6 scenarios, because it feels like justice has been served somewhat more.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, I think again, like I do really sympathize with Psaro because again, we would all do something, wouldn't we? We wouldn't just like, oh yeah, they're dead or something like that. You would just ignore it. But I think part of like my other part of my problem is it really does it happen really subtly? Like it's just like one line of dialogue, isn't it, that she dies? You don't really find out until later on, right?
That's true.
So it's like, oh, you don't really get a smidge of that like empathy until later on, and even if you don't, because that cutscene where you is the cutscene the flashback like optional, or is that part of going into the tower? I think it's part of going into the tower, isn't it, in Rose Hill?
I think so.
Yeah. So okay, that's fine then. So at least you do get the context there. But yeah, like, yeah, I think you pretty much summarized what I said pretty well, Sollosi. Like again, like I do sympathize with him a lot. Like I would react in the same way, and just maybe wish there was a bit more time spent on it, or maybe wish that, well, that the chapter 6 is what helps, I think, for me.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I'm not going to spoil another video game that we're going to talk about soon enough here, but but you know, I was playing Nier alongside it, and I'm still playing Nier now, and you know, thinking about like the approach to like how we react to people who harm people we love. And Nier is significantly more critical of this issue than Dragon Quest is, but that's not surprising. But I think that I might sympathize with him a little bit less. Like I understand why he's upset, of course, and the idea that he would, you know, do like anything for Rose, and I get that, and I sympathize with that, but the idea that you have to wipe out all of humanity because like some people were mean is like, I don't know, it's like a bridge, maybe a couple steps too far, and like how much pain he perpetrates as a result of that. Like, I mean, like the answer to the question is yes, he has a point, but like his reaction to it is so extreme that he loses the point in the process. I understand where he's coming from, but I don't think that in any way it is justified. Okay,
maybe this is too much of a modern reading on this, but I think that part of the problem is also Psaro's support system. Because, like, cause he's basically, I mean, he's a denizen of the demon world. Like, I imagine people have been whispering in his ears to wipe out humanity, like since before he even met Rose, because he's so strong and such an ideal leader of a demon army. But with this happening, Psaro feeling more anger towards mankind than ever, and then he has, you know, jerks like Amon whispering in his ear, like, but the world would be safe for Rose if you just killed all the humans, and that just amplified all of it. Like, there's probably some kind of, you know, dark corner of the internet subculture kind of echo chamber he's living in that's making all of this worse. So what I'm saying is Psaro joined the wrong Reddit communities at the wrong time, and then decided to wipe out all of humanity.
I hate that you use that so much.
It was probably 4chan.
All right, so we agree. Even though he doesn't have facial hair or a fedora, Psaro is a Reddit user. Interesting. Okay. So let's talk about someone indirectly that semi-resembles Psaro, which we've mentioned a couple times earlier this month. This is the Jason Statham / Magus question. Could Psaro have joined the hero's party if circumstances were a little different? And this is the easiest question in this entire sub-series of episodes that we've done, because the answer is yes, because he actually does. In Chapter 6, you discover a way to revive Rose. She was killed by Amon and some demons, but blamed it on the humans, which causes Psaro to completely lose control and turn into a giant mega demon using the Secret of Evolution. But you use, through an optional side quest, you can revive Rose, have her talk Psaro out of his crazy transformation, and Psaro reverts to a humanoid form and joins your party. So this actually happens in this game, but to do so, you have to reverse some of the plot of the game and cheat death. So like by exposing the deception that Amon does, sort of off screen, because we mentioned we don't really see Rose's death. We just hear that Rose died while you're sort of on the path to stopping Psaro.
Is it when you kill Amon as well? Is it literally one of the things he says? Doesn't he say, like, she's died now or something? Or is it before that? I don't quite remember.
I think you hear that she's died before then. Okay. But Amon reveals that it was demons and not humans when you kill him.
Okay.
I think. But I would have to... I would have to re-examine it a little bit to figure out to see if I'm a little bit out of order there. But it does happen somewhat off screen, and you hear about it rather than witness a death scene for Rose. Mm-hmm. But again, we call this the Magus question because this is this can happen in Chrono Trigger with Magus. Apologies for spoiling a game that is 26 years old. And again, definitely because of the shared Akira Toriyama DNA, and because both of them are vaguely magical, vaguely demonic humanoids, Magus and Psaro kind of look similar.
They do, yeah. Is Psaro like the first villain to ever... Well, no, it wouldn't have been, would it? Because it was only in the DS version, so... Yeah.
Oh, the first villain that joins the hero's side? I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, because it wasn't in the original version, so it wasn't, right? Because it would have been 2007, so no, because Magus was before that as well, so yeah. But...
Well, no, I think it also happens in the PlayStation version, which is probably still after 1995. I think that was. I think that's 1998.
97 or 8. Yeah, that's fine.
But I that would be an interesting question. Who was the first Jason Statham of video games?
I don't know.
I don't want to spend too much time thinking this over, but I don't know. Does Golbez count?
I mean, he doesn't join, does he? It's like one fight, right?
Yeah, it's just one fight, and you don't even get to control him.
Right.
Yeah. Does Kane sort of health count? He's not like
Kane,
evil. He's being controlled by Golbez, right?
Kane deserves his own episode of RPG villains. Straight up.
True.
I mean, he's not a villain. He deserves his own episode.
That sounds like something we should say for the podcast.
Here we go.
I wouldn't be opposed to doing that, especially since we've talked about Final Fantasy IV a remarkably little amount of time for this for a podcast called Retro Encounter that is definitely obsessed with JRPGs.
I wouldn't be against that.
Yeah, we've done 0 on FF4 or 5 and 1 episode on FF6. I think we should increase those counts in 2021 or 2022. But that's not up to me. It's up to RPG fan staff and sometimes the RPG fan community. But anyway, we have completely lost the plot. Back to Magus, back to Psaro. Could he have joined the hero's party? The answer is yes, because he does. Do we have anything else to say about this? Like, other than how awesome he is when he joins you?
So powerful. Oh my god. Everything.
I mean, he's like the anti-Magus on that front. Like, Magus is like not very powerful in Chrono Trigger when he joins you. But Psaro is the best character. I mean, and the idea that like evolution is what sort of brought him to who he was, like a boss, but like pulling him back from that, the idea that he's still incredibly powerful and incredibly useful. I love that.
I know it happens more times than just Magus, but when you fight someone as a super boss and they have 10,000 HP and they join you and suddenly have 1,000 HP and can't use all the awesome attacks they had when you fought them as a boss is a little annoying. But for Psaro to do this, and he doesn't have exactly all the same attacks that he had when he was a giant two-headed monster, but he kind of has all of the most powerful spells and equipment, and that's kind of great.
It's really cool, though, because you never fight Psaro as his human form, do you? You only ever fight him as his demon form, whereas Magus, you do fight in his... You only ever fight him as normal form because he doesn't have anything else. So, you've already got this idea of what, Magus will be like when he's in your party, and then he still fails to meet those expectations, whereas the only time you've ever fought Psaro is as the demon form, and you've only ever heard of what he's done, or sin, in the terms of, your village being burnt down, so... You've got an idea, but not on the same level as Magus, because you haven't had that same one-on-one fight. But so then you get him, and he's kind of even in the middle of what you would expect a powerful human being to be and what you have already fought. So it's a really cool kind of culmination of like, oh wow, he's actually really good. Like, yeah,
it's that, and also you do have to build him up a little bit.
I think
he joins around level 35 maybe, and has a bunch of good spells, but then he learns a bunch more spells as you level him up to say 40 or 45, and he has oomph. Because I think he has every powerful like offensive and support magic, with the exception of 4 or 5 spells. Otherwise, your 5 mage characters would be completely useless.
And he learns Magic Burst, I think, at some point.
Yeah,
I think he does.
He learns Magic Burst. He also is the only character that learns Hatchet Man, which is a classic attack that appears in a couple other Dragon Quest games, which I think upgrades to Executioner in DQ8 and a few others. But he's like this awesome new toy that you get to play with in this optional post game, but it's not perfectly ready made. You still level him up and get the satisfaction of getting him his best equipment and seeing him grow and all the cool stuff he learns. It's just a very well designed, fun post game that is not aimed at being an extra challenge or something for like a masochistic grinder. Just something like hey, here's this awesome character, and we people have loved this character for a bunch of years. Now you get to use him, and he's awesome. I don't know. Like I love just about everything about what Chapter 6 accomplishes in Dragon Quest IV. Even if it takes a dark, tragic ending and undoes it a little bit like Act 3 in Dragon Quest XI. But I'm also an Act 3 in Dragon Quest XI defender. So yeah, you're coming to the wrong person.
Yeah, I don't get people who don't like Act 3 of Dragon Quest XI, actually. I'm not usually a person who's like that, but I actually don't. I would have been very disappointed in Dragon Quest XI had it ended at Act 2. It was too open.
And I've heard people on in general social media and places like the RPG Fan Discord and even the RPG Fan Slack, which is only RPG Fan staff members, that feel that the game should have ended at Chapter 2, and I totally disagree. Like the whole point of part of the fun of Dragon Quest XI is seeing the world break and then putting it back together again. And Dragon Quest IV's Chapter 6 is a little bit like that in a way that I really like. I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you think that third act is like a bit of a homage to Chapter 6 in Dragon Quest IV?
Yeah, it could be.
Just in the way that it's structured, just like the whole, I'm going to go back and make sure things don't happen the way they happen again. And I know you don't quite do that in Dragon Quest IV, but you do at least go, hang on a minute, I can stop the villain in a different way, that I don't have to kill them, and I can undo the evil that humans have done, because, not humans have done, but I can undo the evil that Amon has done, and I guess by proxy humans, because they bullied Rose into a tower. We can save her life and let her live her life out with Psaro. So yeah, maybe in a way
it might be an homage to that, but I think it's also an homage to Dragon Quest VII a little bit, because that game is about going back in time and preventing calamities to rebuild the world.
True.
But in an even more sort of iterative way than Dragon Quest IV, because that's the structure of most of Dragon Quest VII. But we're talking about Dragon Quest VII and 11 a lot on a podcast about Dragon Quest IV. So let's go and move on to the next category. This one is called bonus footage, and this is similar to something like DVD extras or a director's cut of a film, adding footage that wasn't there in the original version. Is there a moment in Psaro's story that we know happened from context or from discussions, but don't actually see, that we would like to have seen? And I think, I want to see more stuff about what happened to Mina and Maya's father. Because Mina and Maya's father is an alchemist who rediscovers the secret of evolution, which was some kind of ritual or technology from ages past that is a major part of the plot of Dragon Quest IV. And because he's a character that we never see, and he eventually factors into what happens to Psaro and what he does. And I like Mina and Maya, and we don't get a lot out of them other than some sassy commentary from Maya. If you let her be held hostage in Themyscira when you do that quest, Maya's pretty hilarious in her commentary there. So I like Mina and Maya. The secret of evolution is important to the plot of DQ4. I would have liked to see either Psaro interacting with the secret of evolution, or Mina and Maya's father like discovering it and deciding what to do with it. Because we don't even know what he looks like, right?
Nope.
Nope, we don't.
It would probably be a generic old man sprite.
Probably would, yeah.
Or maybe one of those guys in the green suits with like an M. Bison cap on.
Even better.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I mean, mine's going to be kind of boilerplate. I mean, I feel like, and this goes back to something Alana talked about earlier. I hate to say this, but I kind of want to see like Rose's death scene, and I feel like that might make me sympathize with Psaro more. Like just like seeing her, because I feel like it's just like so tertiary and over here. Like I feel like it doesn't have the kind of impact on the plot or emotionally that it could have, and I feel like that would actually enhance Psaro's characterization quite a bit.
Yeah, that would be one thing. Gosh, I mean, we know so little about Psaro outside of his relationship with Rose and the fact that he wants to kill everybody, right? Like, I don't want to give like a really generic, I want to know how things started out, but like genuinely, he's human, right? Human, but becomes a demon, right? And he lives down in the demon world. So
it's a little unclear.
It's like, I want to know how he ended up there. Like, at what point like everywhere I've read has described him as demon but human in brackets, or like some kind of other like tertiary answer. But like, yeah, there's like, I don't want an origin story necessarily, but like, I'd certainly want to know how, other than using it's the armlet, isn't it? He gets the armlet and he's got the secret of evolution. I want to know why he's in the demon world in the first place, and how him and Amon come together. Like, where does he meet Amon? Where does he find out about Estark and Balzac and all of these other associates that he has? And yeah, just why? Why does he team up with them? Do they just, like you were saying earlier, Sollosi, like, do they whisper in his ear things? We just don't have that. And it would be, like, I don't think things suffer necessarily because you don't see any of it, but I think it would add a really interesting wrinkle, but it would also probably give away too much again. Like, yeah, like you'd probably know too much before the whole Rose is dead. Oh no, now Psaro's like angry and upset, is gonna destroy the world. So yeah, I suppose I would want to know like how that like group of demons come together, or how Psaro ends up in the demon world in the first place, because I don't think it's clear what he is really, or where he's even from.
You know, my assumption the whole time was that he was a full demon, but that because demons come in all shapes and sizes, some of them are humanoid. Because you know, a lot of Toriyama demons, like, you know, like Piccolo from Dragon Ball, or Slash and Flea from Chrono Trigger, like, are vaguely human shaped, but have, like, you know, unusual skin colors and pointy ears.
Even Magus, yeah,
exactly. So and well, Magus is is not technically from demon kind. He's from a different place.
Correct.
But because demons come in all shapes and sizes, I sort of assumed that maybe Psaro was demon royalty or something, or from a specifically powerful group of demons. And going into exactly what he is and how, like, he came to be this demon champion, I think that is a very good answer to this, because we don't really know anything about this except that he is the champion of the demon army, and he hates humanity, and that's sort of where we begin with him.
Pretty much, yeah. I know, and it's a pretty basic answer, but like I think it warrants a little bit of discussion here at least.
All right, no, I totally agree, Alana, but I think it's time to move on to the next category. This category is called regrets. Who besides Psaro has the most regrets within the plot of Dragon Quest IV? And this one's a little harder for me, because there is a lot of regret and bad feelings that happen to Psaro and around Psaro. But while I think in the previous episodes I was always able to find someone for this question, I'm having a little bit more difficulty now. So I'm going to repeat the same answer that I said before. I think it might be Mina and Maya's father, because like him discovering the secret of evolution is one of the catalysts for this whole conflict. That and one of the few that you can tie to someone besides like Amon, who definitely doesn't have regrets. By doing that, his own murder and everything that happens to his daughters, and part of what happens to the demon army is through that. So I'm sure that, on his deathbed after being stabbed in the back or whatever, Mina and Maya's father had a lot of regrets. And if he's, if the afterlife exists in Dragon Quest IV to a degree, he is looking upon what's happening with regret. But I struggle a little bit to find a fair answer to this question.
Yeah, I've probably got a related answer then, having had a thought about it right now. What about Ojam? The student, who knew all of this and wanted... I mean, maybe regrets is the wrong word, because he does kind of get that moment where he saves Mina and Maya at the end of Chapter 4, staying behind Palais de Leon, right?
Mm-hmm.
He stays behind and he fights the demons to allow them to get away, and... he dies, or presumably dies as a result.
He does. You can find him. In fact, I did. He's at. Do you remember there's a village north of where you find the Armlet of Transmutation, and
yes.
and you had to deal with a bunch of people pretending to be Tsarevna Alana.
Oh yeah.
If you go to the inn there, Ujam is recovering with and he's being nursed to health by a dancing girl that was the object of people's affections in a different part of the world. So it appears that Ujam survived and may have found romance in chapter 5 of the game. Yeah. So I don't remember the name of that town, and I think it's one of the handful of towns in the game where you can't zoom to. But if you visit there and go to the inn, you can find Ujam later on. But I mean, I'm sure the circumstances around his master's murder, Ujam has regrets about that. But he was trying to make good by saving Mina and Maya.
Yeah, exactly. And he is down in that cave, isn't he, defending that chest, or defending what do you get out of there? You get something with the twins, don't you?
The Sphere of Silence?
That's it. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so he's clearly got every intention to stop at least Balzac, and he doesn't fully get to do that, but he at least allows the twins to get away. But again, like you say, he would have regrets over his master passing away, and they could have had this wrapped up sooner, potentially, but they don't get that chance to do that, and so I'd imagine he's got regrets over that, but at the very least, he does get a little bit. But yeah, that's the only other answer I could think of for this, personally.
Yeah, well, one thing about the Sphere of Silence, I didn't think about that until now. You find it in a late-game dungeon. So I think what must have happened was Ujam got the crap beat out of him, and the demon army recovered the Sphere of Silence and locked it away in one of their strongholds.
Oh, I don't know about that.
That must be what happened, because I mean, you find the Sphere of Silence in a chest somewhere late in the game. I don't remember exactly where, but I remember getting it back. I tried to use it against one of the later bosses, either Psaro or Amon or someone else around there, and it didn't work. Whoops.
I did not try. I think this is kind of a tough question. I'm going to say Ruby. At least through Chapter 5. I feel like she probably doesn't really have any in Chapter 6, I suppose, because she has the ending that she wants. But, obviously being close to Psaro, and she is the one who sort of sets you on the right path to stopping him. I imagine that she has some regrets about maybe not intervening sooner in everything that Psaro had done.
Do you mean Ruby or Rose?
Rose is who I mean. My apologies.
No, it's sorry. I was struggling to remember who Ruby was. I was like, damn it! Did I completely miss an important character?
Yeah, I'm playing Final Fantasy 14 too much. What can I say? Yeah. So I mean, just Rose, intervening earlier, and I think the volume of destruction. I'm sure that she feels some guilt about everything that's happened to Psaro as a result of him trying to sort of defend her.
Yeah, I did consider Rose as my answer as well, actually. And yeah, she does get you on the right path. And I'm trying to think of what else she could be regretful for other than just not being able to stop Psaro, because she does sort of try. And I think even in the tower, she kind of suggests go and stop him. I don't want him to kill everybody. But you must feel horrible if the world is bullying you is the wrong word, but persecuting you for what she is,
right?
Yeah, and yeah, it must be awful. But
this is only a vaguely related question, but the hero's friend in the starting village in Chapter 5. Do we think that she's also an elf?
Oh,
She certainly appears to be.
Because she has a sprite really similar to Rose's and has mysterious powers with her transforming spell. I thought maybe she was also an elf, but one that was living comfortably with humans.
she's definitely my heroine's girlfriend. That's one thing.
Oh yeah. No. I think she has romantic interest in the hero, no matter what the gender of the hero is. But having them as just happy girlfriends at the end of the game. You know, we didn't mention this in the previous episode. It's such a beautiful scene where
it's a nice hug, yeah.
Yeah, you like it looks like she either had faked her death or had escaped death, and she like meets the hero in their village and they hug, and then they turn back to the village entrance. You think they're going to rebuild, and all of the hero's friends have come to the village to help them rebuild. And it's like,
it's a very Dragon Quest end.
Yes,
very nice.
It's very Dragon Quest, but also gives me those warm, fuzzy Dragon Quest feelings. So I knew what I was getting into. I'm not, which is why some of the darkest scenes in, let's say, Dragon Quest, like 9 and 11, really were gut punches when you see them happen. Because I'm used to this being such a fairy tale saccharine kind of series a lot of the time. Mm-hmm. But. All right, we've talked a lot about Rose and Psaro and others' regrets. The final question is Psaro the main villain? And I think that we have a very fair no answer to this, or maybe a couple of fair no answers to this. Because Psaro is the final boss of the story and is the sort of villain in the background for most of the story, so you would be absolutely justified in saying he's the main villain. But I think there's a few potential other answers here. The most obvious one is Amon. Amon is leadership within the demon army. He's the one that betrayed Psaro and killed Rose to motivate Psaro to transform. And Amon is definitely interested in ruling the world and destroying most of it. To have him as a sort of manipulator-style villain completely fits, and he is the final boss of the Chapter 6 post game, unless you have strong feelings about Chow Mein and Fu Yung. Then also, I think you could say Estark. Estark is a demon lord from centuries earlier, who was defeated by some vague other group of heroes, and he was maybe the closest the world had ever come to being taken over by demons before. And the legend of Estark and seeking out Estark's powers, and Estark also used the secret of evolution, centuries earlier, is one of the motivating factors and goals of the demon army. At first, they're trying to revive Estark, and then they decide instead to have Psaro use the secret of evolution to become powerful like Estark. So, even though he's not really an immediate villain, he definitely is part of the bad guys of the game. And the last one is, again, me going back to my semi-obsession with the father of Mina and Maya. Balzac is a human that uses the secret of evolution and betrays humankind to join the demons and serve Psaro. And without Balzac's actions, a lot of this game wouldn't have happened. So I think Amon is a very fair answer to who's the real villain, but you could also twist the question a little bit and land on Estark or Balzac.
You could.
Well, I think I have to say Amon. I think that he's the one who's behind everything to some degree. Psaro still made choices and made his own choices in a lot of cases, and committed acts of atrocities and acts of evil on his own, but the person who most serves to benefit and the final villain, if you're playing the TS version, is Amon. And I think that as a result, that would probably be my answer.
Yeah, that's mine too, just for the same reasons. I think that more than any other villain, Estark is kind of a brief snippet in your adventure. You hear about him. I think at one point I remember asking Alina, and Alina was like, "Oh, in our immediate presence, we have to go and fight Estark." I'm not trying to do a Russian accent, but he's one snippet of the story, and again, it's more Psaro trying to revive him to use him. So it's almost like Psaro is trying to do what, I don't know, the same that he's doing to Balzac, or the same that Amon is doing to him. I'm not sure. Balzac is responsible for lots of different things that kind of set things in motion. But again, it's all for Psaro, I think. But Amon is the one that, you know, I think there's plenty to say about, like, people who just, you know, genocide is a really terrible thing, but, like, manipulating people's emotions to get them to do your stuff for you. Like, Amon is killing Psaro's girlfriend to make him, like, progress world domination, basically. Like, that's a pretty awful thing to do. Like, you know somebody's weakness and you're going to, like, use it against them and ensure that Psaro is then blinded by his grief. Like, that's kind of horrible. Like, that's one of the worst things you can do, I think, is just, like, play with people's emotions in any way. But in particular, if you're going to use it to try and take over the world, then I think that's kind of terrible. So, yeah, Amon, I think, is definitely the main villain.
So, Amon, kind of terrible. We're in agreement.
Kind of terrible.
I think me even bringing up Estark at all is informed by him being like the hardest boss of all the grotto bosses in in Dragon Quest IX, and being like the strongest unit in the Japanese version of the terrible Dragon Quest gacha game that I'm playing. He has a sort of legendary super boss quality about him that isn't really true in Dragon Quest IV, but you know, being informed by other games in the series, mostly in things like post-game content, had me, you know, inflate his importance a little bit.
Yeah, unless you cheese him in Dragon Quest VIII, he's the hardest boss at the end.
At the end of the 3DS version, that's right. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, he does steal an engine. That's pretty bad. Like,
not even an engine. He steals a gas canister for a hot air balloon.
I couldn't remember whether it was a gas canister or an engine. Yeah, that's bad. How dare you take away transport? Like, what?
So not only did he almost conquer the world 1,000 years ago, he's also a shoplifter.
He steals the only supply of gas in the world of Dragon Quest IV. Like, come on. You've just taken away. He's becoming a gas or an oil tycoon. Like, why are we doing...
Oh, maybe the Mammon Mine miasma that's corrupting everything is really just, you know, normal... Like normal gas that should be used that should be used to empower engines and stuff. It's like a coal fire or something.
And there's a world tree and there's a pure kingdom in the sky. This is definitely a video game about global warming. Yes, correct.
Oh man, it's those environmentalist messages in Tales of Fantasia are all coming back.
They're preceded by Dragon Quest IV. Thank you very much. Even the Yggdrasil tree. There you go.
Yeah, the Yggdrasil tree is also in Dragon Quest III, although it's maybe not quite as huge in the story as it is in 4.
There you go. Estark, true villain for taking away gas canister.
The true villain is obviously human greed, and and the true hero is the friends that we made along the way, and JRPGs.
I mean, you could make a case for humanity here, because they are the people who are racially abusing Rose. Like, you know, what would have happened if people were accepting, right?
I cannot believe I didn't think of that as a potential answer before recording.
No, I mean, it's not really explored a ton. Like, it's in a couple of flashbacks, and it's just otherwise, like, Psaro hates humanity. But, like, you could make an argument. I mean, obviously, Psaro's hand is turned. Like, you don't, like Zach was saying earlier, like, his reaction is so extreme. And, like, I think most people's reaction wouldn't be if your girlfriend was being, attacked because she is a different race, or she has she has a magical ability. Like, they're scared of her crying ruby tears, or because she's an elf. Like, your first reaction wouldn't be to go out and kill everybody, would it? Even if it happened over and over and over again. Like, you'd build anger up against it, but you wouldn't, in most cases, you wouldn't. In 99.999% of cases, your first instinct would not be to kill all humans, right?
Like, but yes, we agree that his reaction is exaggerated, but earlier we decided we have some empathy for Psaro because of his motivations, and he hates humanity because of his circumstances. So I'm not saying this is the answer, but humanity being the ultimate villain of Dragon Quest IV is I think a potential answer, because humanity is not shown as purely good, and demonkind is not shown as purely evil in Dragon Quest IV.
Yeah, and Amon just probably takes advantage of that with Psaro and uses it because, you know, you think humans have killed Rose for a while, and then you find out not. So, yeah,
Psaro,
it's part of the puzzle.
Ammon's playing both sides to a degree, which makes him, I think, probably the fairest answer to who is the main villain of Dragon Quest IV, if the answer is not Psaro himself. But anyway, we've already talked a lot about Psaro over the past 3 episodes, counting this one. Well, you know what? Past 4 episodes, because he does come up a little bit in the Dragon Quest draft as well, didn't he, Zach? Huh?
Yeah. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, let's. Okay.
Yeah, let's start with that.
All right. Maybe if we do a redraft, I can snag Jade as well. But so you definitely know all of our thoughts on Psaro. We've done 4 episodes on Dragon Quest this month. 1 Dragon Quest Fantasy Draft, 2 on Dragon Quest IV in general, and 1 on Psaro from Dragon Quest IV specifically. I think Psaro or Psaro might be a more accurate pronunciation of his name, but on the NES version he was just called Psaro, S-A-R-O, and now I interpreted his DS spelling as sort of a silent P, like psychology or pseudo or something of that nature. I don't know if it's Psaro, Psaro, Death Psaro, which I think is what his final form in Japanese is called. Psaro is an interesting character that, just like the game he's in, feels ahead of his time as something within RPG lore. But we've been living in the past a little bit, or the more distant past a little bit, talking about a 1990 video game. Next week, we're going to be talking about a 2019 video game. Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers is the most recent expansion to Final Fantasy XIV, but it won't be anymore later this year when we finally get to play Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. So we've done a couple episodes on Final Fantasy XIV in 2021, and this Shadowbringers episode coming next week is going to be our final in that miniseries. Following the Shadowbringers episode, we're going to do an extremely selfish episode on my part, talking about Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise, the 5th generation Monster Hunter games that we're in right now. World and Rise have a lot of similarities and differences, but are now the flagship games for what Monster Hunter currently is, and Monster Hunter is more popular than it ever has been. So there's a lot to discuss, and this is going to be the first Monster Hunter podcast I've done since 2018, and you bet I am fired up to talk about Monster Hunter a lot on a podcast. And if you listen to Random Encounter, maybe you've already gotten a taste of my Monster Hunter enthusiasm. But after FF14 and Monster Hunter, 2 of my multiplayer jams, we are going to a game I've never played before. That is Nights in the Nightmare, which was a PSP and DS game from the 2008 to 2010 range. I believe the DS version came first. That is developed by Sting and part of their Department Heaven series, and it is weird and cool, and I don't even know how to begin talking about it. We're going to do 2 episodes on Nights in the Nightmare coming in June, probably the second half of June, depending on how the schedule falls together. So please look forward to those. You can, but if you want to discuss Monster Hunter, Final Fantasy XIV, Nights in the Nightmare, Dragon Quest IV, or anything at all, the best way to reach the podcast is to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on RPG Fan's message boards, our Facebook page, our Instagram page, our Twitter page, our Discord server, our YouTube channel, or our Twitch channel. Something streaming every day on Twitch, and that YouTube is getting more populated every week. You can also listen to RPG Fan's other 3 podcasts: Random Encounter every 2 weeks, mostly about randomness; Rhythm Encounter, currently on hiatus, mostly about RPG music; and Phoenix Edge, usually weekly, also on hiatus, mostly about current events. You can listen to all 4 RPG Fan podcasts on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartRadio app, whatever podcast listening venue you choose. Please leave feedback. We love feedback. I should say Apple Podcasts instead of iTunes, because iTunes died months ago now, haven't they?
Long time ago, yeah.
Wow, yeah. I am going to change that in my show notes that I copy and paste almost every week.
Thanks for not correcting us, listeners, which, yeah.
Yeah, it just goes to show how few listeners we truly have.
It's not right. They're everywhere. People download off the website, listen on Spotify, which is what I do. So, yeah, just come listen to us however you want, basically.
Yes, and I think I will start saying Apple Podcasts instead of iTunes from now on, because I think, man, I haven't updated my PC's Apple software so long. I think it's still called iTunes. Maybe I should fix that. But listeners, if you want to reach out to each of us individually, you shouldn't use that email. How should we do it? Starting with you, Alana.
Twitter is the best place for me. I am at Alana Hagues on there, or you can find me on the RPG Fan Discord as Alana.
And Zach, give the people what they want.
You can email me, zachw@rpgfen.com, or you can find me on Discord at zachw.
And listeners, if you want to find me, you've probably heard me say this before. The best way to do so is Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times. You can also find me on the RPG Fan Discord as Monsoon Mike. So, Psaro, he's a hell of a villain. He's a hell of an ally when in the games where he's allowed to join you. And I'm not sure there's a better NES villain except for maybe Quickman from Mega Man 2. Well, listeners, thank you, good night, and good luck.